awakening is not an option. Once the train has left the platform, you have to manage it accordingly. The train can't come back. Usually in elective scenario, what happens? If you deal with unanticipated difficult airway, you think like landing back to the earth and doing the surgery the next day. But trauma, this option is not available. Another important difference in a trauma airway is that surgical airway should be considered as early as possible. You should not be ashamed of achieving a surgical airway even at the first place. Maybe some traumatic patients, the airway management is only doing tracheostomy or trachothyroidotomy as the primary airway management in some cases, right? You should not try intubation in those particular patients. Now the ATLS 2018 guidelines, the difference between the older and the newer ones as far as the airway is concerned. Cervical spine immobilization term has been replaced and it is now restriction of the cervical spine motion, right? It's no more cervical spine immobilization. Rapid sequence induction has been changed to drug-assisted intubations, right? In the last guidelines, drug-assisted intubation has started coming into picture, but now it's totally abolished in the January 2018 guidelines, and they say it's always drug-assisted intubations. And there is an emphasis on video laryngoscopes. Use of video laryngoscopes for intubation over the direct laryngoscopes in trauma settings. These are all are the inclusions of the airway as per the 2018 guidelines. Another important thing which has been asked in your exams, specifically in practical exams, if your viva gets deviated towards the cervical spine and you tell we stabilize or restriction of the motion by the manual inline stabilization. Your examiner may ask you what is the appropriate way of doing a manual inline stabilization. These two pictures should come in your mind and you feel like you can see the hand, the position of the hand of the assistant. Where it is in the first picture? Anybody? At the level of mandible, excellent. And the second picture, it is at the level of ears. It's actually at the level of ears. If you put the hands at the level of mandible and the intubator attempts to intubate, there will be restriction to the intubation and the intubation become even further difficult, right? The scenario was already difficult and you are making it further difficult, right? The new concept says there should be 2-person mills. What is 2-person mills? That one person is doing the stabilization like this and the other person should put the hands on the shoulder, right? So that there will be no movement, right? So this is 2-person mills or manual inline stabilization. Now what is the changes in the breathing? Coming on to deep breathing. Everything is there. There is one change in the breathing in the new guidelines that in severe injuries to the airway which hampers the breathing, the flail chest has been removed now. Flail chest is no more a component of severely compromised breathing in ATLS, or tracheobronchial injury has been included in the newer guidelines of 2018. Coming to circulation, a bolus of isotonic solution of 1 liter of adults to be given in patients who are hypovolemic or hemorrhagic shock. The olden guideline says immediately you have to rush in 2 liters of fluid, right? 2 liters of fluid has been replaced now and the new guideline says 1 liter of fluid has to be transfused. If a patient is a child, then 20 ml per kg body weight, less than 40 kg body weight has to be given. So aggressive resuscitation before control of bleeding has been demonstrated with increased mortality. That is the ground of decreasing the amount of fluid in the newer guidelines. That it has been found that if you give 2 liters of fluid, then mortality rates were pretty high. So they have decreased it to that particular thing. What is massive blood transfusion? Anybody? For trauma patients. Anybody? Yeah. Massive blood transfusion.
Replacing the whole blood volume in the 24 hours or half the blood volume in 6 hours.
Okay. Anybody else want to attempt it? Excellent. So what I want to emphasize here is, in trauma resuscitation scenarios, the definition of massive blood transfusion is little different, right? And it is the difference has again come in January 2018 only. Massive blood transfusion, as per the new guidelines, is the transfusion of more than 10 units of blood in 24 hours or more than 4 units of blood in 1 hour, right? This has been recently changed only, and earlier it was the same which our friend was saying. Now another change in circulation. This picture you might have seen in your textbooks many a number of times. The classification of hemorrhagic shock 1, 2, 3, 4. right? We all know the changes in the heart rate, the blood pressure, the amount of blood loss or something like that. But in the newer guidelines, what changes have been made in this classification? Base excess has been included in categorizing the hypovolemic shock, right? In class 1 shock, the base excess is 0 to -2. In class 2, -2 to -6. In class 3, -6 to -10. And in class 4, -10 milliequivalents or even lesser. And another addition is the need for blood products. Earlier, the classification says that in class 3 and class 4 shocks, you have to give a combination of crystalloids and the blood, right? The newer guideline says in class 3, class 4 shocks, blood at the first place, right? Blood products has given priority and no crystalloids at first place. If diagnosis is class 3, class 4 shock, you have to go for immediately blood replacement. Disability is the D part, neurological evaluation. This is the old one. These points you all know. You have to assess the pupillary size, the localizing signs and all those stuffs. Exposure, you have to keep the patient undressed. When you are examining the patient undressed, you have to take care of the temperature should be normal. There should not be hypothermia to the patient. Hypothermia will further exacerbate the scenario. Now coming on to the head trauma. Classification of the head trauma is on the basis of GCS, Glasgow Coma Score. Earlier the classification system says that it was minor, moderate and severe. In the newer guidelines, the minor word has been replaced with mild. And now as per the GCS, it is mild, moderate and severe. In the newer guidelines, there have been some changes in the GCS also, right, which I'll be discussing in the next slide. And there will be detailed guidance on the systolic blood pressure management. In trauma patients, the previous guideline says that the systolic blood pressures have to be kept always above 90 millimeters of mercury, right? Some text also mentions 90 to 100 millimeters of mercury. But the newer says that maintain SDP for more than 100 millimeters in a patient of 50 to 69 years of age. They have included the age criteria for systolic blood pressure in trauma patients. And more than 110 they say for 15 to 49 years and older patients more than 70 years. This is again a recent update. Seizure prophylaxis has been added and anticoagulation reversal guidance has been added in the January guidelines. Now what is the change which I was mentioning in the Glasgow Coma Scale in the newer guidelines? कितनी बारी इस चीज को देख लिया हमने, पढ़ लिया, कंफ्यूज भी हो जाते हैं, जब एग्जाम में पूछा जाता है तब हमें मुश्किल भी आ रही होती है, राइट? तो इसको बाय हार्ट याद रखना चाहिए. दिस इज समथिंग लाइक अगर इक्विपमेंट में एंडोट्रेकियल ट्यूब नहीं बताते तो नर्वसनेस बढ़ जाती है और हमें लगता है अब हम पास होना हमारे लिए मुश्किल है. सिमिलरली केस में जीसीएस इस तरीके से नहीं बताते तो लगता है कि बहुत मुश्किल हो रही है, राइट? इसको बाय हार्ट याद करें. एम्फेसिस इस समय ये रहेगा कि इसमें चेंज क्या हुआ है जनवरी 2018 में. इन आई ओपनिंग पेन इज रिप्लेस्ड बाय प्रेशर, राइट? जहां पे आपका था आई ओपनिंग इन रिस्पॉन्स टू पेन, नाउ इट इज आई ओपनिंग इन रिस्पॉन्स टू प्रेशर. एंड वन मोर थिंग हैज बीन एडेड इनटू ऑल द थ्री थिंग्स EVM, नॉन टेस्टेबल, राइट? 4, 3, 2, 1 and then non-testable. There are some patients in which you can't test that. So that you mention it as ENT. E, eye opening, non-testable. VNT, verbal, non-testable. There are two changes which has been made in the recent guidelines in the GCS classification for trauma patients. Seizure prophylaxis. Prophylactic use of phenytoin is not recommended for preventing late post-operative post-traumatic seizures, but it has a role in early prevention of early post-traumatic seizures. However, early post-traumatic seizures have been not associated with worse outcomes. इसका क्या मतलब है कि अगर 7 days के अंदर अंदर पेशेंट आपके पास आ जाता है आफ्टर ट्रॉमा, यू हैव टू गिव अ सीजर प्रोफाइलैक्सिस. उसके बाद देने का कोई मतलब नहीं बनता. देयर इज नो यूज ऑफ गिविंग सीजर प्रोफाइलैक्सिस आफ्टर 7 days. If the patient is on anticoagulants, right, you have to reverse it immediately. Then only the bleeding and coagulation cascade will be improved. Somehow we keep on transfusing blood products and all. We have to take a history from the attendant whether this trauma patient is on some antiplatelets, anticoagulants or something. Unless and until you give the specific antidote, your blood and blood products are not going to help the patient much. These are the goals of treatment of brain injury. The important goals I'll just be highlighting. Now the next question is on ICP. This has been asked multiple times in various universities, right? How to monitor the ICP and the management of ICP. So you should be knowing the indications in what patients you need to monitor the ICP, right? Severe traumatic brain injuries where the GCS is less than 8. GCS is more equal to or less than 8 but normal CT scan. moderate traumatic brain injury if there is an abnormal CT scan, and patients with GCS more than 8. 8 is not a cutoff for doing the ICP monitoring, right? What I want to emphasize is even if the GCS is more than 8, but your patient is to be subjected for long duration surgery or prolonged anesthesia, you should always apply ICP monitoring. Now, what are the difference in the management principles of ICP as per the newer protocols? The main goal for the patient with traumatic brain injury is to control ICP, we all know that, and provide an appropriate cerebral perfusion pressure. That should be our goal. We should be providing an appropriate cerebral perfusion pressure. The earlier recommendations were to maintain this CPP, that is perfusion pressure, 70 millimeters of mercury or more than 70. In January 2018, it has been well written in the books that it has to be between 60 to 70 millimeters of mercury, not more than 70. CPP should be maintained between 60 to 70 millimeters of mercury, because what has been found is if CPP goes beyond 70 millimeters of mercury, the chances of patient going into ARDS is much higher. So that's why, that is the reasoning why the latest guidelines have decreased the CPP values from 60 to 70. Osmotic therapy, whenever the question is on ICP, you have to mention about the management of the ICP control. One of the thing is the pharmacotherapy. Mannitol is used worldwide for that. The dosage you should be knowing if you are uttering in your practical examination, 0.25 to 1 gram per kg body weight. Another thing which can be used is hypertonic saline, alone or in combination with dextran. The problem with mannitol is electrolyte imbalance. Whenever you are speaking on mannitol, you should be ready within yourself to answer questions about mannitol in practical exams. Many of our students even doesn't know how much concentration of mannitol comes to them in their hospitals. They fumble 5%, 10%, 20% in their exams, though they are using very much. So my sincere advice is, whatever drug you are using, see it properly, what concentration you are using, right? Dose थोड़ा सा ऊपर नीचे हो जाएगा चलेगा, grossly ऊपर नीचे नहीं होना चाहिए. Now another MCQ, another short note which has become in your exams is ventilation strategies in traumatic brain injuries, right? So ventilation strategies, when we are discussing, you should be knowing it. The current recommendation says that head injury patients should be maintained with normocapnia. Many of our students feel hyperventilation has to be done, and the hypocarbia, the carbon dioxide level should be lower than normal. No, carbon dioxide level should be maintained between 35 to 45 millimeters of mercury, not less than. Hyperventilation is no more recommended in traumatic brain injury during surgery. The important points you should be writing in such questions other than ventilation is temperature control and glycemic control. The latest you have to remember is that hypothermia, which was earlier included, you have to remember that it is to be instituted only if the patient comes to you within first 6 hours of the trauma. Later on, putting the patient to hypothermia doesn't give much of an advantage. Another important thing about glycemic control you have to remember is that you have to maintain the blood sugar level around 140 milligram percent when you're dealing with the trauma patients in anesthesia suits, right? So these all facts and figures are important for you to remember. Another short note which I encountered is role of steroids in spinal cord injury, right? A student should know उसको कैसे हमें शुरू करना है कि what is the role. The question is specifically role. So you have to mention what do the steroids do in cases of spinal cord injury. The first statement says it has been shown to improve spinal cord blood flow, reduce calcium influx, and mitigate the formation of free radicals in ischemic spinal cord tissues. Now next you can mention, if you know the dose, it is well and good, which steroid, what is the dose, and when to be given. Methylprednisolone is preferred, the bolus of 30 mg per kg, and then you have to run the maintenance infusion if the patient is less than 8 hours from the time of injury, right? And then you have to continue the infusion for next 24 hours. But when the patient presents to you after 8 hours of the injury, there is no role of steroids in spinal cord injury. If you write this much, your examiner will be knowing that you know the concept, that when to use and when not to use. Coming on to thoracic trauma, tension pneumothorax, this is again a change in the January 2018 guidelines. We all know by now that in cases of tension pneumothorax, we have to do needle thoracocentesis in the second intercostal space. We know that by now, right? But the newer guideline says that even the needle thoracocentesis has to be done at fifth intercostal space, mid-axillary line for adults. One more emphasis I want to put here is, in pediatric patients, it is still unchanged. Only it is changed in adult patients, that instead of the second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line, now you have to put the needle into the fifth intercostal space, mid-axillary line in adult patients, even for pneumothorax, tension pneumothorax. Aortic rupture management, when there is a trauma, a high level trauma in which you know that the aortic rupture can be there. The use of beta blockers has been emphasized in the newer guidelines, and they say heart rate control with a short-acting beta blocker to control the heart rate less than 80 beats per minute and blood pressure mean arterial to be between 60 to 70 millimeters of mercury. These are the targets you have to ensure. Your patient may be a patient of thermal injuries. The recent change is that we all know in burns patients the Parkland formula, right? 4 ml per kg per total body surface area. But in cases of adults and flames and scald, it has been reduced from 4 ml per kg per total body surface area to 2 ml per kg per total body surface area. Again, the volume of the resuscitation fluid has been reduced from 4 to 2 in cases of flames. But in electrical injuries, it is still 4. Regarding the next step is transfer to the definitive care. There is a specific mention of avoiding CT scan in the primary hospital. The newer guideline says if CT scan के बाद अगर मैनेजमेंट उस पेशेंट को उस हॉस्पिटल में नहीं मिल सकती, don't waste time getting the CT scan at the first place in that particular hospital. Even if there is a facility of doing CT scan in that particular hospital, immediately shift the patient out. Now, what is secondary survey and when does it start? It is a head-to-toe examination, complete history and reassessment. Right? So, primary and secondary survey में आपका examiner चाहता है important points A, B, C, D, E के. Now, definitions, what is primary, what is secondary, and then what important comes into the secondary survey. And secondary survey में आपको ample assessment बताना important है. ये सभी textbooks में दिया हुआ है. What is ample assessment? Now, the question is, how are these trauma patients different from any other patients for surgery? Anybody? The patients come to you for surgery, emergency surgeries. How are these patients different? Most of the trauma patients come to you when it is middle of the night, odd hours, right? When you are already half tired, right? The information is limited. You don't have records, right? You don't know about their medications and all. Most of the patients are full stomach patients. They may be alcoholic, intoxicated, right? They may have the airway involvements. Another question which I encountered in 10 years is initial assessment and management of a polytrauma patient and ventilation strategies in a patient of blunt chest injury and rib fractures. When the question comes assessment and management of polytrauma, if you go in a stepwise approach and make this kind of a flowchart, as Poonam ma'am has said in the first lecture, that there are some questions you have to attempt in a flowchart fashion. This is one of those examples, assessment and management, right? So what your examiner wants is systematic thing, primary survey, secondary survey, and then reassessment, and then damage control, resuscitation. Go in a stepwise fashion when you're dealing with the question of polytrauma. If you mention this, it will be a bonus. That in cases of polytrauma, what is the priority? Sabse pehle, airway management. The first thing. Second is surgical airway if needed at first place. Then you have to remember that any kind of thoracotomies and laparotomies should take precedence over neurosurgical managements, right? Polytrauma मतलब उसके brain में भी injury हो सकती है, thorax में भी हो सकती है, abdomen में भी हो सकती है, right? If you're dealing with that, important thing is go stepwise approach in which you deal with thoracic trauma and laparotomies first, then neurotrauma, and after that lastly comes the limb, right? So this is the sequence of management of polytrauma. Rib fractures, if a patient is having a rib of first and third rib fractures, इससे हमें क्या पता चलता है? First, third rib means इसके पीछे फर्स्ट या थर्ड रिब की कब फ्रैक्चर होती है? जब बहुत सीवियर इंपैक्ट होता है, राइट? बिकॉज दिस इज अ लोकेशन, राइट? इफ देयर इज अ सीवियर इंपैक्ट देन ओनली, अदरवाइज नीचे वाली रिब्स जो होती हैं वो हल्के इंपैक्ट से भी फ्रैक्चर हो सकती हैं. अगर फर्स्ट या थर्ड किसी की रिब फ्रैक्चर है, इसका मतलब द इंपैक्ट इज वेरी वेरी सीवियर. You have to look for hemothorax, pneumothorax, mediastinum before taking the patient for surgery. Otherwise, you lose the patient on table, right? Unlike other rib fractures which are involved. If there are 9 to 12 rib fractures, you have to rule out hepatic injuries, splenic injuries, and renal injuries. So this is how you have to assess your patient depending on the amount of rib which is fractured. Ventilatory fractures इस पे short note आया है, rib fractures पे you have to divide. Whenever asked about ventilatory strategies in your exam, divide in the beginning into 2 parts: non-invasive, invasive. जहां पे possible है उसमें लिखो possible, जहां नहीं है लिखो non-invasive, not possible, right? And then go into the invasive things. Low tidal volume, permissive hypercapnia, and limit plateau pressure less than 30 centimeters of water. Now I'm coming to the last few slides. A 28-year-old guy has met with road traffic accident, head-on collision of 2 cars, and is brought to casualty in a confused state. He was smelling of alcohol. has blood all over the clothes. The patient was conscious but intermittently drowsy. Heart rate is 130, BP is 80 by 54, respiratory rate 24, and GCS was 12 by 15. 2 large bore IV cannulas were secured, ringer lactate was pushed in, and oxygen was started through venturi mask. The blood samples are sent. What all investigations you want to send in this patient, Malvika? 5 minutes. Yeah? Hemogram, okay. Chest X-ray. Other than the routine investigations, any other special investigation you would like in this particular place at the first place? Yeah? Bit louder. Blood screen. Blood grouping and cross matching. Very good, excellent. What else? Fast, and these days the E-fast because it's a case of trauma. Right? At first place you have to go for fast and now even the E-fast. You should be knowing what is the difference between fast and E-fast for your exams. The diagnosis is blunt trauma abdomen leading to hypovolemic shock and to be posted now for emergency laparotomy. Once, if you have a facility of doing the measuring the serum lactate levels, at first place you should be sending the lactate levels also in such patients. Now your examiner can ask you what all preoperative investigations, this we have already discussed. Approach in exam systematically, whatever you do in routine, right? Investigations, OT preparation, discuss with the surgical team. Trauma patients में बहुत important होता है, कई बार trauma surgeries prone में भी होती हैं, lateral में होती हैं, positions are important, and sometimes you tell the patient that as short as possible, surgeon, as short as possible. Your patient will not give you much time. Pre-medication systematically चल रहे हैं हम, right? Pre-medication, sedation usually avoided if there is a difficult airway. Then what is the anesthetic plan? General anesthesia or regional anesthesia? General anesthesia. When somebody asks you anesthetic plan, always be ready to tell in full sentence. My plan is general anesthesia with endotracheal intubation and controlled ventilation. This is how you should reply. Induction of such patients. Any preference of induction agents? Any preference of induction agents? Ketamine in acute shock scenarios. And how about in chronic shock? A patient is traumatized for a long time and reporting to you in a delay. Ketamine is a double-edged sword. Chronic shock, catecholamines are depleted. Myocardial depressant action is very high. So ketamine is not to be given, etomidate to be given. The answer should be no ideal anesthetic drug for patients with hemorrhagic shock. Small incremental doses of whichever agent you select, you should be using. ऐसा नहीं कि ketamine और etomidate नहीं है तो propofol use नहीं कर सकते. आपने utter कर दिया practical में propofol, you justify that. Okay, I can use propofol, but in a very small doses and titratable doses. Succinylcholine avoid in first 3 months. Rocuronium in high doses can be used. Regarding maintenance of anesthesia, एक